Welcome to the Body Ethos podcast, where we're shifting the culture from sickness to health. Before we dive in, please remember that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Hello and welcome to the Body Ethos podcast, where we're all about shifting the culture from sickness to health. I'm your host, Jessica Whitmill, and today's guest is Dr. Ann Weiss. She is a chiropractic kinesiologist with a deep focus in neuroscience and nervous system rehabilitation. Dr. Ann specializes in applied kinesiology, quantum neurology, and the neuroemotional technique, all offering a unique whole person approach to healing that blends both structural work, energy medicine, and advanced nervous system techniques. This conversation is going to be a powerful exploration of how the nervous system has a remarkable ability to restore and balance function in the body. And so I'm really excited to have Dr. Ann here. She is a friend. And this episode just perfectly aligns with our mission to uncover the root causes of illness and empower you on your healing journey. So let's get into it. Dr. Ann, I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really so supportive of the mission of this podcast and so honored that you would include me on this exploration and journey, of your podcast. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited. So I'd love for you to tell the guests or the listeners just a little bit about yourself, why you chose to specialize in things like applied kinesiology and quantum neurology and neuroemotional technique. They all sound very, I feel like maybe some people have heard of these things, but they sound, kind of out there. So I'd love for you to kind of give us an overview of why you were led to these modalities.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had the privilege of kind of getting exposed to at least some of these techniques from a very young age. Both of my parents are chiropractors, and they both practiced applied kinesiology and neuroemotional technique as I was growing up. Yeah. So it was I didn't even realize how profound that was at the time. But, so when I would get sick, we wouldn't go to the doctor. I'd get worked on, I'd get supplements, and that was just normal to me. And, especially as I got older and, in my college years, I have very fond memories of my father, who has since passed away, doing neuroemotional technique on me and just kind of having that flow of the technique as like a song in my head, and just also getting to feel the effects of these really deep, profound, off the beaten path techniques like applied kinesiology and neuroemotional technique in my own life, really feeling the difference after an NET session, or having a pain before an AK session and not having it anymore, just within half an hour. And that was normal to me. So, but and it wasn't even kind of a thought in my mind that that is something that I would do in life. And I spent a lot of my 20s not doing that and doing other things and working, regular jobs that help provide some life perspective. But I found myself at a point in life where I was like, I got to do something. I got to help people. I felt called to serve in a way that I was not able to do in the professions that I had engaged in, before. And I was kind of just doing a review of my life, and I was like, oh, wait a second. My parents did something they loved. We're helping people, learned every day. It's like, this sounds pretty good to me. So I went back to school, and I'd already known again that, techniques like applied kinesiology and emotional technique were just what I wanted to do as things to help people, because they had helped me in my own personal journey. And so I did extra 100 hours and certifications to learn applied kinesiology and neuroemotional technique. And then through my extracurricular learning in my Doctor of Chiropractic program, I also came across a technique called quantum neurology, which is kind of an offshoot of that same sort of world of AK and NET. Immediately fell in love. It just provided a new but complementary perspective to the work that I was already learning. And definitely, we'll talk a little bit more about how that kind of fits into everything and why it's so impactful and cool. But so that is kind of how I came to all of this, and been practicing for almost 7 months now because I graduated in December. So it's just been such a wonderful journey.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that most people, never come in contact with applied kinesiology,
Yep.
right? And so for you to have that at a young age, like how incredible is that? And just like to really be rooted in this knowledge that the body has kind of that innate ability to tell you exactly what it needs. Like I just think that you growing up in that paradigm is just it's mind blowing to me because I wish all of us lived in that paradigm, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, it was so like in the background that I kind of didn't even realize the profundity until of it
Yes.
until I'd gotten a little older. But yeah, I mean, I think once you get into this realm, especially of work that involves muscle testing and like the
Mhm.
profundity of all that that kind of reveals in terms of like, yeah, the body being able to communicate with us, the body being able to tell us what it needs. I mean, once you kind of experience that, it's kind of like there's no going back. So
Yeah.
even though it is weird, off the beaten path, whatever. Yeah, like once you kind of like experience it for yourself, you're just like, yeah, that's it.
Totally, yeah. And I think we'll get into this, but it definitely feels weird on the surface. But then once you dig into the science, there's so much there, right? So it's just it's a hidden I honestly feel like it's hidden, right? This kind of truth and knowledge in this method. So I'm really excited to dig in with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, first of all, we need to know what is quantum neurology and how does it differ from other, maybe more traditional, like nervous system rehabilitation approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. So, quantum neurology is kind of both like a framework and a technique of nervous system rehabilitation, but it is quite like profoundly different from kind of traditional approaches, especially to rehabilitation in general or nervous system rehabilitation. So, most kind of like conventional PT or neuro rehab, it kind of like looks at this localized problem, right? And it's like, okay, we have this weakened muscle after a stroke or some kind of structural injury, or this nerve isn't firing properly, and it just kind of focuses right there on retraining that specific area, or strengthening that specific muscle or something like that, which is all well and good and makes sense. There's a problem here. Let's work here, right? But the thing about quantum neurology is that it works from this understanding that the nervous system is holographic, which sounds odd, right? But what that means is that every part of your nervous system carries information about the whole. Right. And so if there's communication breaking down in one place, it can affect function of the entire system and not just the local area. Or, if there's a breakdown in function in one area, it can affect somewhere totally seemingly unrelated, right? Because it's all connected. So, through muscle testing, we can evaluate whether the body is congruent with like a particular movement or function. Say, okay, raise your arm up. Can you hold against my resistance? If you can't, there's some kind of interference somewhere in the system. And that also helps us to determine, or muscle testing also helps us to determine whether that interference is coming from a structural issue, some kind of chemical issue, or perhaps even an emotional issue, right?
Mhm.
So instead of just trying to strengthen this localized point or of weakness, we're really understand like getting an understanding of where there's a breakdown in the communication flow, and then working to restore that communication so that the entire nervous system, the whole holographic map, is reintegrated. And that's why people can see recovery of function of things they thought they permanently lost, like, for example, taste or smell after a long COVID or something like that, or symptoms improving that didn't even seem related to their main concern. So, in quantum neurology, we work with both the central and peripheral nervous systems, targeting things like motor control, sensory processing, reflexes, organ visceral connections. And what makes that unique is that we're not just working with, the areas of injuries themselves. We're asking, where is the body signal not getting through coherently? And then systematically restoring that function using specific neurological sequences. And so in quantum neurology specifically, we're using real-time nervous system feedback through muscle testing and pairing it with a specific sensory and or like motor input, as well as with red spectrum light therapy to help create a neuroplastic response and help restore that function from like the inside out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think it makes so much sense because it's not always a structural issue, right? So
Hmm.
it could be, like you said, a chemical issue, which is maybe there's a nutrient there, or I'm assuming maybe a pathogen or a toxin blocking.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, I just think it makes so much sense. Or an emotional event, right, that happened in someone's life, a trauma, even maybe a little trauma, right? But it could be a trauma. Yeah. Mm.
Absolutely. I mean, even things, little traumas doesn't matter to your nervous system. If it created some kind of incoherence or overwhelm at that time, that's going to get written in your physiology. And that can create this pattern that gets repeated and repeated until we find that pattern and are able to address it. So, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love how holistic this approach is. And I know you mentioned too the utilization of light to
Hmm.
target specific nerves and regions. Can you talk a little bit more about that concept and why it's so healing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the most unique aspects of quantum neurology is how we use light. And, on the surface, it can sound strange. Like, how can shining light on some area of a body help nerves to heal or restore my taste or whatever? But it actually is rooted in lots of emerging science. And, when you see it and you feel it, like, it's hard not to believe it, right? So, in addition to this idea of the holographic nervous system, another really integral concept in quantum neurology is the concept of neurological recognition. So, the nervous system depends on recognition. Every movement, sensation, reflex depends on the brain being able to recognize the signal coming in from the body, being able to interpret it appropriately and respond appropriately. But if there's been injury, surgery, chronic mold exposure, chronic stress, trauma, like that can all of those things can cause those signals to stop being recognized correctly. And so that's why someone can know something's off. Like I have this foot drop, or I have vertigo, and they get all this testing done and everything looks fine. Their labs are fine, their MRIs are fine, and the doctors are just like, I understand that you're not well and hurting, but you're fine. So you
Yeah.
know
Mhm.
but really the issue is that the nerve the nervous signals either coming in, the way they're being processed, or the way they're supposed to go out, they're not being registered in the same way anymore. And so light is such a powerful tool here because our body is literally made to respond to it. Our cells are photoreceptive, and light helps water in our tissues to conduct signals more efficiently. So, when we introduce light to a nerve pathway while we're testing it or trying to retrain it, it's like giving the nervous system a clear, amplified signal of, like, hey, pay attention to this input, recognize it, and let's reintegrate that. Right.
Mm.
And that's kind of where the holographic principle ties in. Recognition doesn't just happen at one point in the brain. The nervous system is holographic, meaning that information about the whole is distributed throughout the network. And so when we shine light into even one part of the system, pairing it with the right neurological recognition exercise, the entire pattern can come back online. And so, like, the light isn't necessarily fixing the nerve directly, but it's helping the nervous system to recognize that pathway again so that the body can restore its function from the inside out. It's a really fascinating intersection of quantum biology and clinical neurology. And I mean, the results are like instantaneous. So it's really profound and exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, gosh, we'll have to maybe do another podcast on quantum biology.
Uh-huh.
My gosh, I could nerd out to that all day.
I
But
know.
you're right. Like, if just kind of thinking about, our body's supposed to respond to our circadian rhythm, right? It makes sense that our body would respond to a light input in that powerful way. Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly like an example I was going to use. Like, how much of disorder or disease and dysfunction in our modern world can be attributed to the fact that almost all of our circadian systems are dysregulated
Yeah.
today. You know what I mean? Like not getting that light input from the sun, sitting in blue light all day and night. Like, even neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's are getting tied to like this circadian rhythm dysregulation. So yes, like
Mhm.
very deeply our cells are photoreceptive, and there's also this like emerging science where light is even potentially a communication mechanism between cells. They're called biophotons. So it's like even so yes, our cells themselves are photoreceptive, but they also can use light to communicate with one another. So it's like this whole emerging, realm of scientific inquiry and understanding that we're kind of on like the forefront of. But I mean, the implications of it, the more we understand, oh, we're not just, meat bags, there's electromagnetic fields, there's
Mhm.
light communication, like that just expands our capacity for being able to heal and understand like what's going on in the body.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't have said it better. We're not just, muscle and bone
Mhm.
and, arteries and things like, we have so much more complexity that even
Mhm.
science hasn't quite figured out yet, but like you said, there is a lot of emerging science, especially over the last 10 years around this light and circadian rhythm, and I think it's just cool that you're on the forefront of all this with the quantum neurology. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm I'm just a facilitator of techniques that amazingly brilliant people have come up with. But it is cool because it is rooted in both established science and emerging science, as well as, more just that scientific mindset of like openness and
Mhm.
exploration and, you know, the plural of anecdote is evidence. Like the more clinical experience you get, that's just like affirming even these things that might not be totally established rigorously in this scientific research. It's like, but I see that it works. And so
Totally.
why don't we just keep doing that then?
Yeah. Well, okay, so I love for you to talk about maybe some conditions that you typically see respond really well to this, and of
Mhm.
course, if you have any stories that you'd love to share too, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, because we're working with at the level of the nervous system and addressing the body's communication network, the wiring that controls movement, sensation, organ function, how we respond to stress, like the conditions that can be impacted by techniques like quantum neurology, applied kinesiology, et cetera, are quite far and wide. But in terms of things that I've seen respond really well to quantum neurology itself, a couple main kind of categories. So, absolutely like structural or movement based challenges are a big area that we can see improvement in, chronic pain, foot drop, postural imbalances, athletes who need to really gain a lot of power in certain movements. Like, and again, we're not just strengthening like a certain movement, like muscle involved in a certain movement or stretching tight muscles or something like that. Like, we're understanding where imbalances and dysfunctions are arising and addressing that. So people are noticing changes in power output, strength, mobility, coordination, like almost instantaneously through this kind of technique. Another area where we really see really in seeing results is doing work with cranial nerves and sensory issues. So, for anyone who's not super familiar with the cranial nerves, there's 12 of them, and they basically help to control and modulate like all of our senses. So, vision, hearing, smell, taste, facial sensation, swallowing, tongue movement, all of these different things, right? And if those nerves aren't fully online, people can struggle with dizziness, visual strain, speech difficulties, even digestive issues, right? So, by targeting these nerves with specific light protocols and rehab, I've seen patients regain clarity in their vision, reduce vertigo and tinnitus, eliminate teeth grinding at night, even improve things like smell and taste that were lost after viruses like COVID or anything or something like that. And this also has implications for like autonomic nervous system balance because the vagus nerve is one of the 12 cranial nerves that exist and
Mhm.
can be balanced utilizing these techniques. So I have like an interesting little anecdote from recently where I was working on this gentleman who, probably had some kind of disc herniation in the cervical spine. But after, he had that experience, just started having crazy like neurological symptoms in his arms and hands and his legs. But, went to doctors, not finding anything that would be causing these issues. His hands would swell, couldn't feel his thumb. He was getting tingling in his legs, even though that shouldn't necessarily be
Yeah.
related to like a disc herniation in the cervical spine, especially one that's not impeding on the spinal canal itself, which it wasn't, or the
Mhm.
spinal cord, I should say. And so I was working on him the other day and was sometimes I will challenge the nervous system by using a device called a Resine Max, which is a vibrational device which has different programmed frequencies. And one of the frequencies that is programmed into the device is a sympathetic nervous system frequency. And so I'll challenge the nervous system to show hidden weaknesses by putting that sympathetic frequency over areas of the body to see where, maybe there might be
Mhm.
some hidden weaknesses. So I put it over his thumb and then I tested, and cranial nerve showed up and cranial nerve 12 showed up, which is like the hypoglossal nerve, which is tongue movement. And I
Mm.
said, okay, I'm not sure why this is showing up here, but while I change the frequency to a parasympathetic frequency over your thumb, I'm going to have you move your tongue around. Okay. Like, sometimes the body tells us what to do and we just don't question and we just treat, right?
Yep.
So we did that, right? And then we retest on that sympathetic frequency, and that's gone. Good. Then I go a little up the forearm on that same sympathetic frequency, and there was an emotional component there, and light touch, like as a sensory input, needed to be reintegrated as well. So we did that. Okay. So then, after we're done the session, I'm like, how are you feeling? He's like, I can always feel my thumb. Like no matter what. I'm walking around driving. I can always feel my thumb. He's like, I don't feel my thumb right now. Like, and it's just like, integrating sensory processing issues, integrating a cranial nerve issue on an area that is seemingly totally unrelated. The forearm and the
Mhm.
thumb has helped restore like normal sensory processing in this person who's been dealing with this issue for 2 years within one session. I mean, it's amazing,
It
right?
is, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, like I said, uh, things that are seemingly like off the beaten path, like not, constant, like aberrant processing coming from the thumb, can be helped by things like this. I've had, people's vertigo go away in one session. I've had people's tinnitus, which is such a difficult thing to treat, like
Absolutely.
be difficult or be reduced by, sessions of quantum neurology. So yeah, the possibilities are endless to say the least.
I love it. Yeah. Well, and I think it's just, again, kinda going back to, like, the intelligence of the body and how, I think, unfortunately, in conventional medicine, everything's so compartmentalized. Here's your neurology, here's your
Mhm.
cardiology, here's your
Uh-huh.
endocrinology, that type of thing. And you're really looking at all of it as a whole, which I think is so beautiful. And that's kind of why it works, right?
Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
like treating the whole body. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's a huge point of frustration for so many of the people that come into my office. Like I've been tossed around from provider to provider, and within a little box that they're analyzing me through, either they're telling me that there's nothing wrong, or they just gave me a pill based on the symptoms that I told them, or whatever the case might be. And really, like, sometimes we have to, yeah, like you said, everything's connected, and we really have to take a really broad view of what might be contributing to an issue. Why would I think tongue movement would be related to someone's thumb? Like, I wouldn't. But because nervous system is holographic, because everything is so interconnected, like, we can help restore proper signaling in someone's thumb by moving the tongue around sometimes. The body is amazing. And really, what I like about these techniques is it just allows me to honor the body's communication, what it's telling me, and be able to give it what it's asking for,
Mhm.
and letting the body do the work. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And I'm sure, like, if you had, a few hours on PubMed, you might be able to find a connection there
Right.
between the cranial nerve and the nerves in the thumb and sensory output and, maybe,
Yes,
that type of thing. But it's like in
absolutely.
real time, you're just seeing science kind of unfold, right?
Absolutely.
Which is so
Absolutely.
cool. So
Yeah,
I
no,
love that.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to talk about a little bit too, just around like emotions and trauma. I know you said an emotion came up for this specific patient, but maybe
Mhm.
even just how that's showing up in the body and affecting the nervous system in different ways.
Absolutely. That is such a great question, because I think this is one of the most, like, important and overlooked aspects of health and, like, healing. So, for example, I'm a chiropractor, so often people will come to me with structural complaints, and you know, we've ta- you know, we've tackled things from a structural angle, and maybe we've seen some improvement, but there's still something there.
Mhm.
Or, there's someone that I'm working with trying to get their blood sugar regulated. And, they come to me and they're just like, I can't seem to overcome, like, these compulsions to satisfy my, like, sugar cravings or something like that.
Mhm.
They're like, I totally hear you. Like, I know I need to get it under control, but, like, I can't help it. Like, there's just this compulsion, right? So, these scenarios, among others, are just ones that often have me thinking that, like, we need to deal with this emotional side of the kind of triad of health, where there's structure, chemistry, emotion. Because emotional trauma, or just like emotions in general, they don't just live in our memories, they live in our body, and especially in our nervous system. There's neuropeptides that, like, emotions are actually like neuropeptides. They're chemical, like, signals in our body that can influence our physiology, right? And unresolved emotional stress creates what we call, in neuroemotional technique, neuroemotional complexes, which are these, like, unconscious pattern responses to triggering stimuli that can kind of show up physically, in that, like, when this pattern is activated, this certain neuropeptide sequence is activated, causing a certain physiological response, right?
Mhm.
And these patterns are often encoded in the limbic system of the brain, particularly the amygdala and hypothalamus, which can impact everything from hormone output to vagal tone, right? So, really, like, large implications in terms of, how we're able to handle stress, anxiety, things like that. So, through tools like NET, which utilizes muscle testing, we're actually able to identify the origin of these patterns, whether it was a belief formed in childhood or trauma stored in the tissues. And, once it's processed and released, the body shifts quickly. It's really incredible. There are actually studies that have shown that we're actually transforming neurology and physiology through this kind of work.
Mm.
For example, they did a study on cancer patients where they had them record a moment of like one of the most traumatic times of their cancer, either their diagnosis or their treatment, had the patient record their own story, like telling about that moment, playing it in an fMRI machine so that they're in an fMRI machine listening to themselves tell the story about their traumatic moment, right? And the fMRI shows amygdala, hippocampus just firing off the charts, like
Mm-hmm.
super lit up by hearing this traumatic moment, right? And then go through a couple sessions of NET, get back in the fMRI machine, play the same story again, not lighting up in any of those parts that were lighting up. So we're actually transforming neurophysiology through techniques like this. It's because we're using the body to really help us get to the root of these issues and processing it in a way where we're able to break through these really stuck patterns in our neurology. And I mean, they've also done studies with low back pain, for example, where after just a few sessions of NET, like, yeah, we're reporting less back pain. Yes, we're recording better quality of life, which are obviously amazing, but we're also seeing reduced levels of CRP in blood work and interleukins and other like inflammatory markers.
Wow.
Like you've right. I mean, it's insane. We're actually
Mm-hmm.
transforming physiology and neurology through this kind of work. And this is extremely profound because, we're actually able to access and transform the parts of the brain where these patterns are encoded, which, can't be accessed through these conscious, rational mind over matter, top down approaches. Like, please don't get me wrong, I'm an advocate of therapy. I think it can be really great helping people get, things like strategies to help them deal with stressful events in their life and coping mechanisms and things like that, which is wonderful. But I think in terms of techniques that can truly change our unconscious patterning and allow us to really live and be more adaptable, like in a nervous system way
Mm-hmm.
to things in our environment, things like neuroemotional technique really like, and I think probably even from what I've heard from you, things like mind, body, spirit release
Mm-hmm.
really like blow through like these patterns and allow people to live in a much more free, open, and adaptable way.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I love how there's like this research though on NET. Obviously, it's an older technique than what I do,
Mhm.
but it's, I think, very similar in the fact of it's really getting to those emotions that are stuck in the nervous system, the body, the subconscious, maybe even things you weren't really aware that were affecting you,
Yep.
but we're on kind of that loop on the DL in the nervous system,
Yep.
and bringing it to the surface so it can be released, right? And
Mhm.
so I love that. And for those who don't know, like CRP and interleukin, those are like inflammation and immune markers that
Mhm.
really keep you stuck in a state of disease in the body.
Mhm.
So the
Mhm.
fact that, there's some amazing science is so cool. And yeah, I see it in my practice too with MBSR, just, identifying a limiting belief or an emotion that they were like, wow, I had no idea that that was stuck there. And
Mhm.
then having so much clarity
Mhm.
around why they've been feeling the way they've been feeling for the past decade, 2, 3
Mhm.
years,
Mhm.
which you may have never gotten to in a talk therapy session. So it's just
Yeah.
a different way if you're feeling stuck in this conventional model, although
Mhm.
very helpful. I know I was a benefit of talk therapy for a while, but
Yep.
we also did muscle testing in my session, so I had a
Oh,
really
nice.
special therapist. So
Okay.
I think that's maybe why it was so helpful. She did basically something similar to MBSR, NET, that type of thing. It was called
Wow.
AIT, but
Oh,
yeah, I
wow.
mean, I think just, like, getting in there and then having that safe space to talk about it. I don't know
Mhm.
if you do this, but I have my clients bring their notes to their therapist.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. No, I love that.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it can work together, but I love that
Absolutely.
you're bringing this to people, and seeing such profound results. So, because like you said, if there's this consistent structural issue or blood sugar imbalance and a behavior that just can't get unstuck, then like
Mhm.
digging deeper into the emotions and the trauma and the nervous system is huge. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, our brains are wired for pattern recognition, right? And so they in NET training, they kind of use this example of, let's say you're a child and you get bitten by a fluffy white cat, right? That and your body and your nervous system will take that in as like a traumatic experience, right? Like it really hurt, and, you got a
mhm,
boo boo or whatever. Now, the way that the body kind of responds to that trauma says, okay, anything white, anything that's kind of fluffy, anything that has sharp teeth, anything that has, maybe pink little pads, that is a danger to me. And I need to protect myself against that, right? So it doesn't have to be a fluffy white cat. It could be something fluffy, something
mhm.
white. You know what I mean? Like because our brains are so wired for
Yeah.
that pattern recognition, right? And it's a similar thing with trauma in our, day-to-day life. Like, people will be like, I don't understand why I keep doing this. I don't like rationally, I don't understand why I'm acting this way because for whatever reason there's something in your environment that's triggering that response, right? That protective response. And it can be from decades ago. It can be from, you know, when you were born. It can go back way further than we can expect or even
Mhm,
like comprehend on like a rational or memory level. But in terms of our nervous system, doesn't matter if it traumatized us, if it overwhelmed our systems at one point, it's going to get written in there.
mhm,
And all the details and possible players are going to get written down. And if we get triggered in that way, that same pattern is going to get activated of protection, even in environments or situations in the future where it's no longer appropriate. And
mhm.
so, really getting, having techniques at our disposal that really do allow us to activate that pattern in a way that is like allowing it to start moving. I kind of always talk to my patients about it like these are like roots of a plant that are stuck in some really hard soil,
Yeah.
right? And we're just kind of starting to hoe through that soil a little bit, kind of loosen up the ground so that we can maybe start to plant something different in that space. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, that's such a beautiful analogy, honestly, of,
mhm.
this work or even like just nervous system healing work is like, creating more fertile ground for good things to grow.
Yes,
Cause it's not always
exactly.
about like releasing the
Uh huh.
bad, but
Yeah,
it's about allowing space for healing and good things to come in, right?
absolutely. Yep.
Because we get stuck in, you know, it's not fertile for good things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
That's so beautiful, I love that. Well, I love this conversation so much, I don't want it to end, we'll have
I
to
know.
have you back for
Yeah,
sure,
absolutely.
and I, need to get a session with you and then report back to the podcast on how it goes, so because 'cause I'm so
Yes. Yeah,
excited about it, I have,
right back at you.
like, 20 things that I think we could work on,
Yeah.
with quantum neurology especially, so
Absolutely.
I'm really excited about that. So, but I would love to end. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Um, mm, I mean, just in terms of like anything in particular.
Yeah, maybe how people can work with you and see you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I work at a practice in Glendale, Colorado, which is basically Denver, Colorado. I work at a practice called Miller Chiropractic and Wellness. The website is millerchirowellness.net. There you can find out a little bit more about what we do in the office and just give us a call if you're interested in scheduling a session. Be more than happy to work with you. It's a great space for some alternative healing that is really profound.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the thing about quantum neurology. It has to be done in person. So I'll right? Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
because you
mean,
have the
the way
lasers.
I do it, yes.
Yeah, totally. No, I think it's meant to be in person for sure, just the way you have to have the light and everything. It's yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
and I
more
mean,
practical.
things like neuro-emotional techniques, some practitioners do it virtually, but I do it in my office in person just because I really do kind of want that association of that healing space, that, place where people can come and like kind of let the things flow and whatnot. So, yeah, most of my work is in person at this point in time.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I'm gonna link to your page and just quantum neurology in general. So if people are, in California or Boston or something and they can't make it to Denver, they can maybe find somebody near them. Because
Absolutely.
yeah, I just think this technique is so amazing. But I
Mhm.
do think the Colorado is blessed with quite a few practitioners. So,
Yes.
which is really cool. But,
Mhm.
so it's kind of harder to find in some other states, but there might be one near you. So that's really, really cool. So,
Mhm.
of course, see Dr. Ann. She's amazing.
Thanks.
I'm so excited about that. And then I just wanted to close too with just a final question for you. As you know, the Body Ethos podcast is all about helping people shift their lives and ultimately shift our culture from sickness to health. So, what
Mhm.
is one way that whoever's listening to this podcast today, in your opinion, can start doing that today?
Ooh, just one way, that's
Yeah.
hard. I mean, okay, okay, I'll offer one way that's kind of, like, external, and then
Yeah.
maybe one way that's kind of more, like, autonomous.
Perfect.
So one way that I think is external is work with a muscle testing practitioner, so that you can really, truly get that feeling of seeing your own body communicate and react to interventions in real time, to really feel your body's innate capacity for healing and transformation happen, sometimes in minutes, sometimes in days, sometimes in weeks, but still happening in ways that I feel like, our kind of conventional, traditional Western model of health or understanding the way that the body functions is just not potentially capable of in its current manifestation. So, yes, that would be my thing that's kind of external to you. Like, go see a muscle testing practitioner. There
Love
are lots
that.
of different techniques that incorporate muscle testing and mind body spirit release, neuroemotional technique, applied kinesiology, quantum neurology, all wonderful techniques. I think more internal, I think kind of along with this Western model of or an understanding of our bodies, we're often seeing symptoms as like, I gotta fix this, like that something's wrong, like, something's I need to go and like get this symptom gone, right?
Mhm.
I would encourage us to stop seeing symptoms as like, these things that need to be conquered, like, and more as things that like messages that the body is using to try to communicate with us, maybe to tell us that something is wrong. But, oftentimes these are expressions of things that we're not really able to tap into because we're often so disconnected from our bodies that it's just like, oh, this is like this thing is happening like to me, instead of
Mhm.
like an expression of something that's going on inside of me that like I need to tap into. So
Mhm.
like having more curiosity about what's going on in our body, what our body is trying to tell us, rather than like this top down, like, this is happening and I need it to go away. So let me take some pill or, something like that. And I think ways that we can do that to kind of really tap into what's going on with our, like, or just, tap into our systems. Let's get, go sit in the sun with your feet in the grass, move your body, hug your loved ones, go for a walk after dinner, like, see the sunrise and the sunset with your bare eyes, like, really, like, just breathe, you know,
Mhm.
really, like, just take time to, like, you know, settle down, things that help you, like, I don't know, feel more regulated. things that help us connect back with this more like natural rhythm that we have kind of gotten away from a little bit in this more modern age are things that I think can really benefit our systems. I think, because our nervous systems are not wired for our modern world.
Yep.
And so, really tapping back into really simple things that can remind our bodies of like its own natural rhythm are wonderful ways to kind of, they're simple and they're easy and they can just, and there's something that you have control over
Mhm.
and they help us like tap into our own natural rhythm, help us to self-regulate and, the most full and true expressions of our health and our understanding of ourselves. Um,
So beautiful. Love both of those. I think that's
yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
Like, seeing somebody who has that alternative approach to understanding the innate wisdom of the body, but also not always going for a quick
yep,
fix and
yep,
getting more in that rhythm so you can understand, like, why do I have a headache? Or why am I feeling emotional? Or why aren't
mhm,
I having a regular cycle? And maybe it's just a disconnection from these rhythms that we're supposed to be in tune with.
yes,
So I love that. Yeah. Couldn't agree
exactly,
more. So it's so beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you for that awesome message at the end there, Dr.
of
Ann.
course.
I'm just so happy that we've connected and that you were able to be on the Body Ethos podcast and just share about some of these amazing techniques. I hope that you guys really kind of got a deeper understanding of the nervous system's role and how our body has an amazing healing potential, right? If we give it the right inputs and we listen and we ask questions and we understand how everything's connected as a whole. So if this podcast episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who might be navigating some chronic symptoms or looking to heal on a deeper level and might benefit from some of these techniques. And again, you can always find more about Dr. Ann and her work in the show notes below. But remember that, when we're connected to those natural rhythms, we come in better sync with ourself and nature and that innate healing ability that the body has. And so I think that that is honestly one of the most profound ways we can shift the culture from sickness to health. So thank
Yeah,
you so much for being here today.
thank you so much.
Thank you.